So we don't have really too many images, but we have a fair amount. 30 and John Penoyer, our second oldest member with the club, right behind Larry Duke. Oh, also, and and Al. All right, so I don't think everyone knows John. I really don't need a introduction. He's our salon judge for March, and so I'm just going to hand the floor over to him. Can't forget to give him the microphone, otherwise there's going to be no sound.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank the club for again inviting me to judge, and I need a little more light. There we go. I want to thank the club for asking me to judge. I've been judging here for several particular years. And, back in the days of old slide days, it was a lot easier to judge than it is today because we have so many great photographers, and a lot of our equipment that we use allow us to be much better photographers than the old slide days, etc. onto it. So this particular image here is Bull Lake at sunrise. And I like this one here a lot. I think the snag or the dead tree branch really puts this image a little bit over the top for me. If I did anything on it on the left-hand side, I probably would crop it so that the very first mountain peak isn't there. So whether I cropped it to the left over here to the right or bring the left corner in a little bit, that would kind of get rid of that mountain peak. I gave this one a 9. Next. Very well done, a spoonbill. And, one thing that makes this a little difficult from a technical standpoint, you got this very dark background, and at the same time, you got this very bright bird. And to try to get the detail in the bird against that dark background, it really takes a lot of technical skill on it. It takes a lot of photographer skill, then even some post-processing skill. And for those that know me, I am not a fan of pure black backgrounds or pure white backgrounds as far as that goes. But in this case here, the background, I can see a little bit of detail back there, some trees or snags or something like that. I gave this one a 9. Next. I love to photograph the prairie birds. Well, I do a lot of shooting out in the prairies, etc. onto it. And I really got to commend the photographer on this one. I have quite a few meadowlark images, but I've never ever able to get to this close to them. And a lot of mine, as I do photograph, are actually out my car windows off a beanbag. And the photographer, you can see, got really down low to the grass. I mean, he or she is shooting at eye level here. And then the good thing about that is, and just luck has it, there's not a piece of grass or nothing in the eye of that bird. And I said, how did he do that? But it's really nice. I love the grass, really nice detail in the bird. Plus I also like the room that as he's looking there off to our left onto it. That was an 8. Next. Yeah, I believe this, we have a female red-bellied woodpecker, I believe this is. And, a lot of times they go on dead snags, in this case, a wooden snag after a fire set her onto it. Really nice detail into the bird itself. A good highlight into the eye. Probably the biggest problem with this image is that competing a lot with the background has got a lot of the white into the background, which really competes a lot for the woodpecker itself. But still, the technique the photographer had got really some nice detail in the white breast feathers here. I gave this one a 7. Now, next. Now, this is an interesting picture for me. And first of all, I look at this and I want to take the red jacket person out of there. And so if I'm now judging it, my comment would have been, why did they cut off the river there off to the left? And I said they should have moved the camera over, or zoomed out or something like that. but now we come along and we put the person in there. Your focus really changes because your focus now is really not over there, but you're focused on the person and you're looking at what that person now is looking at. So I really do like that person there. And I think I like the contrast of the bright red against everything that pretty much is white there. I gave this one a 10. Next. I love these poppies. It's the Arctic poppies onto it. And, you know, the 5 that you see right there kind of onto the, well, the center to the right, I think are probably the main picture. I think the poppies in the upper left kind of takes your eye away from the poppies that are there onto the right-hand side. So, you know, I think probably what I would have done would maybe have brought that left side over, and that would have taken out those 2 poppies and plus the 1 bud. And then you really concentrate on the 5 poppies that are there. I gave this one a 7. Next. This one here is really well done, and Hinga. You know, the photographer really got all the wings in there, got nice detail in the wings, got the nice detail in the tail feathers. And again, the Nhinga is looking off to the left, so we got nice detail in the neck. And of course, the habitat that they're in, I really like the background because that is the actual habitat that they're in. And very, very well done. I gave this one a 9. Next. I've been to the Maroon Bells, I don't know, 2 or 3 different times over the years, even though it's been several years ago. And it's kind of one of these iconic locations that if you're in that area of Colorado, that you do have to go there. And I do like what the photographer did there. I'm going to call them sunflowers right now, but they're down there on the bottom. That really helps fill that lower left corner down there onto it. Now, of course, the beautiful reflection that you have off the lake, etc. I gave this one an 8. Next. Yeah, I really kind of like this one here a lot, and it's a Z onto it, so I'm going to guess it was a controlled type of situation, maybe a zoo or something like that, where they took this picture. And the photographer really got some nice detail onto the lion, the face of the lion. Probably 2 things that I wished. One, I'd like to have seen the lion have turned his head maybe a little bit to the right, so you get more of a profile. Or better yet, even if the lion would have turned his head maybe a little bit toward you, the photographer, that would then allow you to pick up that left eye that is kind of dark. And that dark eye there probably did bother me. And so I gave this one here a 7. Next. I'm not sure why the title of this says say cheese. You know, this is a fiddlehead, is what we call a fiddlehead onto it. Very nicely fits into the botany category onto it. And I think that really, really some nice detail on the fiddlehead itself. And that's kind of what they do before they start spreading out, et cetera, onto it. Probably, I don't know if you need quite as much room onto the right of that. Again, I like that the background isn't real black, so I can see some greenish type of colors in there. But I probably would have brought the right side maybe in just a little ways into the left, and that allows it to be maybe more of a vertical, but I think that would be the perfect composition for this. But very nicely done. I gave it a 9. Next. I love to photograph lily pads. I take my kayak out or my canoe out, and you know, it takes lots and lots of time to find the perfect lily pad. It's not the water lily itself. It's also the lily pads that are right behind it. Because what happens, the lily pads themselves, when they first come out, they're really nice and green. They got some nice shapes onto them, but it doesn't take very long. They begin to curl up on the ends, and they begin to get very brown. So I think one thing on this, the photographer, I could tell you need to be there earlier and late because people have told that to me in my lily pads. The lily pads, the flower blooms in the middle of the day. So I can't really tell them it'd be at a different light because that's when they bloom is usually after 10 o'clock in the morning, et cetera, onto it. But I think probably a little bit hot spots here. And I think they got a lot of hot spots onto the flower itself, onto it. So when you photograph something like this, an overcast day is almost always the best. I gave this a 7. Next. A really nice portrait of this bald eagle. It's about a 4-year-old bald eagle. You can kind of tell by the head's not completely white yet. It's just almost in the process. And plus the beak is not full yellow onto yet. Some really nice detail onto the head itself. So nice job on the head feathers. Great composition. The eagle has some room to look into a little bit. And nice detail in all of the feathers, etc. onto it. I gave this one an 8. Next. I keep forgetting the next, Mark. Morning of Lake Superior onto the South Shore. You got some really nice lines here. I do like the lines of the shoreline, how it kind of takes your eye to the point, then the way the trees are formed. They also take you down to that same point. So some really nice lines that you have on here. Probably the biggest thing I find distracting is probably the snag, coming off to the right, going across all the beautiful colors. I think that would have been a better image if that wasn't there. I perfectly understand there's nothing you can do about that unless you could move somewhere, but I don't think you could have done too much with that. I gave this a 7. Next. Now, this is really a pretty cool picture. And I always like to kind of point out when I teach a lot of my wildlife photography classes that, it's really important that when you choose an image for composition, if an animal is moving, that you really want to show the moving. And a lot of times that is done by the leg position or something into that order, set her onto. And you can kind of see with that right leg of that gentoo being lifted up, that it is moving as kind of a little bit of a cockeyed onto it also. Beautiful light on this. And the penguin has a lot of room to move in over here towards the right itself. Very, very nicely exposed. And when you get a dark bird that has a dark head, the dark wings, you got that really white breast feather. You have a lot going against you as a photographer, but did really a nice job of capturing this image and really some nice detail onto it. I gave this a 10. Next. Now, an image like this doesn't ever get the wow factors that maybe birds or animals do. But, I do just a ton of botany type photography. And I really, really appreciate what the photographer did here. He saw, he or she saw something that maybe even myself or maybe somebody else would have easily passed up onto it. I'm going to use the macro lens, really zoomed in onto this bud, etc., and got some really nice detail in the yellows and the greens. And I'm just going to call them the little hairs that you see around there. Really, really nicely composed and really well done. This is the 10. Next. Yeah, well, we had a big eruption this year on owls, as probably most of you know. And they had a big eruption on the boreal owls, et cetera, along with the great gray owls up in northern Minnesota on this year. And this is probably one of my favorite owls is a boreal owl, even though I didn't go up to try to get images of them this year. But just really nice. I love the wide-eyed look at this, that the owl is just really looking at something onto it. It has beautiful light onto it. But at the same time, I do think that on the owl itself, it does have some hot spots on it. Around the eyes and on the white a little bit. I think the photographer probably needed to maybe stop down another third of a stop, etc. onto it. So I think that area of the owl is probably a little bit overexposed, and I gave this one a 7. Next. This is really pretty cool. I photograph a lot of insects, especially in the nectaring type insects, et cetera, onto it. And this is the position bees and butterflies and that type of stuff that go into. I really like the background that we have on this. I think if anything, you could have probably cropped just a little bit off the top. We don't need to quite, I want to see some of that, but I think if you take that one stem in the upper right, if you'd have brought that down where that part of the stem is not there, then I think you probably have a little bit better of an image onto it. I gave this one a 7. Next. When I received this one, it had it was classified, well, it still is right down there as a W, which we mean as wildlife. And so, so every camera club does a little bit different on their wildlife. Some camera clubs wildlife can go for botany also. It's just got to be a native type wildlife. So I actually changed this one to a B or G. I scored it as a G, not a wildlife, onto it, because this is more of a prairiescape or a landscape or a botany type of an image. I think those might be turtle heads. I'm not sure. So I look at this, and when you photograph prairies, and I do a lot of prairie photography, in the back of my truck, I have a little footstool that stays there. In a prairie, the grasses are up here. Very, very difficult to shoot when the grass is about, your nose or above your head. So I always have a little stool on here. So when you shoot this straight on like this, you're trying to tell me that the image I wanted would be the turtle heads. I don't know if that's what he or she wanted onto it. So if it is a landscape type, you needed to get higher to shoot more down into it. And so I gave this one here a 7. Next. Very, very well done. Again, you got that really nice background on it. You got the pelican with the head. You got a good highlight into the eye. I think you did really a nice job of framing this and a good job of cropping this. I think probably the competition is what maybe brought the score down a little bit, but I gave this one a 7. Next. Again, this is really a nice landscape. And, when I shoot landscapes, two things I don't like. I don't like blue sky, pure blue skies, and I don't like pure white skies. I like skies with character, white puffy clouds or stormy type of clouds. And I think the stormy type of clouds that we have here did two things. One, it gave you some nice texture in the clouds on that part of the image. But at the same time, if you had a bright sunny day, this would be a very hard image to take because you have so much contrast the way those cliffs are. So being overcast, you got some nice clouds up there, the nice format. And then you also got the nice, the gold type of stuff. Now, there is, again, some type of building there, but again, our X category, that there's permissible. And the same thing, you got lines, the shoreline of the rocks leading you there. You got the lines at the base of the mountain also that lead you down onto there. I gave this one an 8. Next. This is really a great image. And, I think when you photograph birds and animals, the better the weather element you have, the better that image is going to be. So for me, when I photograph birds and animals, my two favorite is fog and light falling snow. Those are my two favorite weather elements to photograph birds and animals in. And so this particular photographer got a beautiful hawk owl on the snag on a branch that's not distracting at all. And then they got this lighter background with a falling snow onto it. And again, both the yellow eyes are nice, wide open, clear, looking right at the photographer, et cetera. I gave this a 10. Next. This is really well done for a couple of things. One, I like the interaction the birds are doing. They're not so much interacting with each other as they are interacting to something. I'm not sure what that is. And probably the best thing about this, obviously the name, Scissortail. The photographer caught all of the scissor-tailed. And I think that's imperative for the image, because that's what it is, a scissor-tailed flycatchers. And again, really a nice muted background onto it. And then the other branch in the upper left actually adds to the image itself also. I gave this one a 9. Next. This is really a nice great gray. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a ton of them the last few months up in northern Minnesota. And again, I like the clouds that this particular one is in. And I like the eye contact onto it. Looks like the owl's getting ready to come into something, etc. So very well done. I gave this one an 8. Next. A really nice prairie dog on it. You got some nice detail into the feathers itself. And I think maybe a little bit of noise into the background. So possibly try to use some denoise or something onto that. I gave this one here a 7, and probably because of the bright background or the background right in front of the prairie dog. That actually does take your eye away quite a bit. I'm not sure what you can do with that when you go into post-processing. Try to use some of your tonal controls to maybe see if you can control that just a little bit. But really a nice job of getting the entire prairie dog into the picture. You didn't cut anything off, and the prairie dog has got his attention to something, etc. onto it. So this was a 7. Next. I looked at this one here quite a bit for a couple of different reasons. One, I was trying to figure out a little bit what kind of bird it is. I think because he's all fluffed up, etc. onto it. And I'm pretty sure I know what it is. But the other thing that did bother me just a little bit is that if you look at the water, it looks like the water is kind of moving down to the left. And I think that would be a very, very easy fix to fix that if you wanted to try to straighten that. Now, again, I understand sometimes waters, they do move a little bit. I didn't really mark it down for that at all. But I do, it just bothers me a little bit. I would have probably leveled it off if I was post-processing this particular image onto it. I gave this one a 9. Next. Really nice mountain goat, really nice detail onto the goat itself. And I believe the meadow that he's in, I think those are tansies onto it. If that's what they are, they are usually in quite a big area. They're actually an invasive species, but they're in a really, really a large area usually. So if that would have been the case, probably one thing I would like to hope the photographer did would have maybe zoomed out a little bit to catch also some more of the habitat into it. But as it is, I like the highlight in the eye. I like the nice detail into the goat itself, etc. onto it. And the other thing I really appreciate what the photographer did, so many times when you get an image like this, you can't see the feet. And so what happens, a lot of people have a tendency to crop it on the bottom. And I call them the imaginary feet. I want to see those imaginary feet. And so the photographer did really a nice job to give it room in the bottom of that frame. A lot of people will actually crop it so maybe the line would come just at the very bottom where those feet would be, but I want to have room for there. So they did really, really a nice job on doing that. Next. Oh, 8. That was an 8. Thank you. This is a Merlin preening on it, and a really nice, again, I do like the background on this because the background is kind of small compared to where the bird is. So we got a lot of frame filling of the bird image, and the bird is doing something. He's preening. He's got the the one leg lifted up, and he's busy printing there itself. So we have some action there along with that. So I gave this one an 8. Next. This is one of the things that I like to photograph quite a bit. And I have to make up my mind, do I want to photograph the flower with the bee on the flower, or do I want my subject to be the bee? And a lot of times when you have one bee that is nectaring, almost will guarantee there's usually several other bees around. So a lot of times you have those decisions, you can make those and then go ahead and compose and zoom or take whatever image that you want here. So I think this one here, I'm just looking at a coneflower, and the bee happens to be on the coneflower. If the subject would have been the bee, then I think you needed to zoom in or get closer so the bee is more into the frame itself. And for me personally, I think that's where the image would lie. So if you're photographing the bees nectaring on these various flowers, then I think you need to be prepared to really kind of show that, etc. I gave this one a 7. Next. Well, this is one image that I have to admit, was really the very last image I scored, because I had to keep coming back and try and determine, well, if I liked it or not, I guess, is what I was trying to do. And I did like it from the time that I saw it. Now, a couple things that I really like to point out here. I'm going to assume this is an in-camera movement where probably the photographer maybe made a little bit of vertical movement onto it. That doesn't work on everything that you want to do. There's got to be some things that makes this work. Now, what makes this work is the layer effect that we have. We have a layer effect from these plants onto. You can kind of see the little ridges all the way as you kind of go up. That gives you that layered effect. So this one really works onto it. I gave this one here an 8. Next. Now this is interesting. Matter of fact, I'm going to change my score on this one. I'm going to give this an 8. Now, what's interesting by this, because I had a hard time with this one when I'm looking on my computer. When I initially looked at it, again, when I judge, I don't zoom in on images. I don't do that. I look at the picture the way it's presented on my computer. And some camera clubs, by the way, demand you don't zoom in. You judge based on what's on your screen. And that's the way I feel. So I didn't zoom in on any of these images at all. I just looked at it by its present. So when I initially looked at it on my computer, I kind of thought that the eyes were a little bit out of focus of not only the fish, but also of the otter. But now as I sit and look at it here, from here, they do look sharp. So I gave this a 7, but I'm going to change it to an 8. So you can do that, Mark? Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to change this one here to an 8 because I really did like it. But I'm looking on my computer, I say, gee, I don't think those eyes are sharp. But as I sit back here and I look at it, the head and the fish, which is really the critical area that has to be sharp. You know, if I'm out of focus or not sharp in the hump or the back of the arm, that's okay. But the image is in that head and the fish and then those front feet that you have onto it. So very well done. So I gave this an 8. I think that's it. Next. Yep, that's it. Oh, okay.
Thanks, John. We always appreciate your honest feedback, making us better photographers. We're just going to go through the 8s, 9s, and 10s. For the 8s, David Hoyt, Spring Meadowlark. Carl Feigenschuh, Maroon Bells. D. Honeysett, bald eagle. Mark Ye, Miklador, Mikladalor. Carl Feigenshoe, Great Gray on the prowl. Todd Bolson, Mountain Goat. D. Honeysett, Merlin Freening. Alan Schultz, Backlighted Sorrel Movement. We have River Otter with Fish by Don Specht. For the nines, Paul Cameron, Bow Lake at Sunrise. Michael Sweet, Rosette Spoonbill. Barry Mullen, and Hinga Drying. Jonan Karatikin, Say Cheese. Barry Mullen, Scissor-Tailed Flycatchers. Jonan Karatikin, Splish Splash. For the tens, Mark Ye, Funigar. Alan Schultz, Cool Gentoo. Don Specht, Black-Eyed Susan Budd. Marianne Sear, Northern Hawk Owl. That's it, everyone. Have a good night. Drive safe. And don't forget, next week, we're back in Edina, the Edina Library. So that's for April and May.